Welcome to my 88K model railroad video, and this is a continuation of our Wiki demo lesson map. In our previous video we covered speed, and today we're going to cover blocks and routes. Now blocks and routes work hand in hand, so we're going to cover them in this single video. The blocks are basically locations, be it origin or destinations. Routes are how to get from one location to another. If you were to look at what we do manually, we identify the train that we want to operate, where it's located, then we find the destination. And once we locate or see the destination that we want the train to run, we select the path. Once we select the path or identify the path, then we start throwing the switches in order to route or create a successful path to the destination. That's basically what we're doing in automation. We're going in and setting up each one of these tables to give Rocrail the ability to map out and execute and create its own instructions. The best way to look at it is this is the next level of a script. Typically on a script, what you'll do is you'll turn this recorder on, you start initiating the commands, and once you initiate the commands, the computer starts to copy and document each one of your steps and then compiles a script. Then you take that script and run it, and it replicates what you do. At the next level, what we end up doing is providing tables so that the computer software can reference those tables and create a path beyond what we would do, what it would be doing copying a script. So just keep that in mind in what we're actually doing, and you'll start to be able to see things. So let's get started. What we're going to do is kind of trace out a couple of things so you can see it for yourself. So let's go over to the computer. Okay, using this graphic, let's just visualize what we would do if we were to operate a train. We would look for the train that we want to move. In this case, it would be CV4, the NS 2418. Then we would look to and ponder which location or destination we would want to travel to. In this case, we're going to say SB1. Next, we will basically follow the path and identify each one of the switches and the positions that the switch needs to be in order for us to complete the movement. This is the same thing that we have to do in Rocrail, or the same thing Rocrail will have to do to move one train from one location to another or to another destination. Now, before Rocrail can do that, we have to set up and configure each one of the locations and each one of the routes, so Rocrail can then go through and make the selection of whichever route that it's going to take. But in most cases, we will direct Rocrail to select this particular route. And that's it. So now let's go through and look at the tables and everything that makes this happen. Okay, back to Rocrail. Now, what we did was we pretty much mapped out each one of the steps that we would take to operate the locomotive. And that's what I've got here on the sheet, or not on the sheet, but on the plan. We've got you select the loco, then you select the origination, then the destination. After that, we start to look for the route of how we're going to get from point A to point B. Then we verify the switches are in the position that's going to help us arrive at the destination. And then from there we would start the train. If you look at the throttle here, it's got the listing, and we know that that's table locomotive. The next thing here, that's in the selection, the origin, the origination and the destination. Remember we talked about and said the block is a location, be it destination or origination. And that's where the table block comes into play. So we can pull up table block and we can look at all of the blocks here. You can see that we've got blocks CB1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we have SB1, 2, 3, and 4, and that shows up on our block list. Within that, you have a short or local route list, and these are the routes that are connected via, or locally connected via block to block. So you could see SB1 to CB1, then SB2 to CB1, and this is all based upon CB1. So if we go to CB1, we can see that it's all connected in to this block SB1, SB2, SB3, and SB4. And that's what we see here. So these are all the localized blocks that are directly connected to from block to block, and that's kind of like a given. But from the long route position or perspective, that's where, or the, I should say, long haul. So the long haul routes we can look at in table route. And these are all of the combinations of destinations or originations and destinations. And you can see it goes through. Now note that it says generated by the analyzer. Rocrail has a router that will configure all of your routes, and it looks at it based upon the locations or the blocks, plus and minus, and which it shows to be the in and out connections. And that's what you see here. This gives us the bulk of what we know as our route list. So closing this, so now that's where we see our routes. Next is the switches. So we have the switches, and if we go back and look within the route, each one of the route has its basic connection. And if you look into, let's select CB1 to SB1, or I'm sorry, CB4 to SB1. So if we connect that and then go into the going to the commands, remember we went back and we manually start throwing the switches here. That's us setting up the routes, and that's what this command does for each individual route. So as you look through each one of the routes, you can, or I'm sorry, as you look through the routes and you identify each switch associated, this is where the commands to throw the switch will be executed, and that's how you preset the route. So once the route's preset, meaning once the switches are preset for the routes, now you're ready to run the trains. Now here's where you can see I have steps 6A and 7A. That is based upon a computer, because we have our eyes to see where the train is traveling and where it gets to the point that, let's say, it enters into the block, and then you start to decrease the speed all the way to the stop point. The computer doesn't have the ability to see, and that's where the sensors come into play. So we put the sensors in position to trigger the event of the locomotive exiting the block or entering into the block. And in some cases you'll have the preset, or I shouldn't say preset, the sensor, you have two sensors that sets the second sensor up in sense of, let's say the train's coming in at 50 kilometers, it hits that sensor for it to get ready to slow down, and then it would hit the next sensor, and then that would bring it down to, let's say 15 kilometers, and then from 15 kilometers it would then slow down and come to the stop after it hits that sensor. And that's where sometimes Rocrail can measure the distance of the block and then be able to stop it at a particular location. And that's where it gets into the timing and all of that. But we'll get into that later. So now you can see how each one of the tables are associated with an event or an action, and that's what we have to go in and configure. So we have to configure the blocks and give it all of the basic commands, or the understanding of what to do, for lack of a better word, understanding of what it needs to do to get the train from A to B. And these are the basic tables, so that's what we'll be going into and making the modifications or the adjustments to the tables and the parameters in order to get the train to do what we want. So with that, let's go ahead, we'll stop this, and then we'll go back into some of the tables. Okay, so one of the tables that I wanted to get into, or actually it's not a table, it's here in track plan, and it's called the router. And what the router will do is it will take all of the blocks that you have, all of the sensors, all of the track pieces, and it will compile your route list in your route tables. So you can actually run in or lay out your plan and then run the router program, and the router will create your list, and you'll be able to go from, let's say, nothing, meaning you're a blank router table, and it will then create, like I pointed out earlier, that's where this particular listing comes from. You can manually build your routes, or you can allow the computer to do it. Now there's some routes that the computer may not see, and you'll have to do that manually. But for the most part, you'll be able to create, or it will be able to create and generate your route list. So I wanted to make sure that we talked about that. And what you could do is to put a couple of pieces together and actually just make a loop, a single loop, and then run the router, and then you'll see or I shouldn't say it's a simple loop, but a block of four, or four blocks in a loop. So that way you have similar to like the Wiki demo, and it will go in and create your router list. So I think that was something that's important to go over. Okay, to wrap things up now, I think this is a good time to talk about where you guys should be. Earlier on in the other videos, or actually in the beginning of this whole sequence of using Rocrail, I talked about your eyes getting acclimated to the screen and to the layout of Rocrail and its tables. And I think now you should be at a point where you're familiar with the tables and how they work. And we can go in to look at one point, and we'll look at one point, and it's something that I left out, but you can see how easy it is for you guys to be able to find it now. So let's close this out and let's look at the screen. There's something that goes on whenever whenever a locomotive is going into a switch and it initiates the command. In some senses, you need to decrease the speed of the train itself, and you can set that up, and that's found in the table routes. And remember, the route table in the command it allowed you to set up the switches in for example, in this route, the CB1 to SB1, that route uses these 6 switches. But you can see here there's an option that's called reduce speed. And what it'll do is, depending on how the switch is turned or what you want the train to do, you can have it to slow down as it goes through the switch. And that's found here. But remember, I was talking about your eyes are now acclimated, and you'll start to see things that you may have missed before. But if you go and look at this particular table in the route, and what's so funny is sometimes you'll ask a question to Rob, and Rob will give you a list, and it will point to exactly what your answer is or what you needed to know, and it was there all the time, but you missed it. And that's part of your eyes getting acclimated and not being acclimated. But now you should be to the point that you could see this particular window, click the help, and the help will send you directly to that particular menu list. And within that menu list, you can look over to the right and look at reduce speed, click it, and you can see that the route will check the switch needs. If this switch needs to reduce the speed, if not set to straight. And there's a whole different write-up or explanation of reduced speed that you can click on. So here you can see that I think you're to the point that you'll be able to find a lot of stuff on your own now. And like I said, it was difficult before. I had problems myself, but until I sat down and started to kind of map things out, then it became a lot easier. So hopefully this will help you guys out. I think we can close up the blocks. This will be the key to your further advancement. You can use this demo, go through, run the trains, and just as we did, because you have the base knowledge, you'll be able to trace and see exactly what's being done. And that's going to open doors for you all throughout Rocrail. So I'm going to end it here. If you guys need more information, just put it down in the comments to say, hey, this is what's kind of lacking, or can you do this? And I'll try to get something together. So as usual, like, subscribe, and we'll talk to you guys later.